Welcome to the Maverick Paradox podcast, where we explore what it is to be a maverick and discover effective modes of leadership. I am Judith Germain, and my mission is to propel the maverick mindset into a world where character and integrity will ultimately have a higher premium than personality and bureaucracy. So thank you for joining me on this journey. If you would like to continue with me, then please download future episodes on iTunes. But today we have Joe Lawrence, who is a leadership coach with extensive military experience. Welcome, Joe.
Hey, thank you, Judith, for having me.
No worries. Could you tell me, Joe, what it is that you do in the leadership sphere?
Yes, currently I run basically a small community college for the Air Force, the United States Air Force, and we train maintenance technicians from all over the world on the C-17 cargo aircraft. My background is aircraft maintenance specifically, but over the years it has evolved through different leadership positions. And now that's what I do. We award college credit, and I'm getting ready to transition out of the military. And I want to do something very similar for the civilian world here in the States, where I'm going to be a director of training and help people kind of bridge that gap in leadership.
So I was really kind of drawn towards your podcast. Can you tell me a little bit about that?
Yes, actually, I started the podcast. I have two young children, an eight-year-old daughter and a 4-year-old boy. And I know a lot of the things that have happened in my life. I look back on the advice, especially in adulthood. I look back on the advice given to me by my parents. And I know back then when they gave me that advice, I never really took it to heart. But over the years, I find it's been, I'm sure the same way you have experienced. It's like clings around in your head whenever you hit something. You know, you hear that thing from your mom or dad just hitting you in the back of the head. And so I kind of wanted to create that podcast to give my kids an opportunity to go back on some of those conversations that we have. And this is just another way of exploring it, especially when I get to speak with interesting people like yourself and other leaders all throughout the world. And just sometimes just kind of go on there and monologue my own thoughts. So that's the basis behind my podcast. And we explore different avenues of leadership and professional development as well.
Thank you. I just love the title, Inspire Tomorrow and Lead with Purpose. Because I find that a lot of people in leadership positions don't really think about how to inspire other people. They just see it as kind of like an authority. Do you find that?
Oh, yeah, definitely. I'm sure you've probably seen it as well. Most of us, what we do is, especially a lot of our leaders, when you start off in a young leadership role, you are trying to manage whatever task or program you're in charge of. And a lot of us don't have that long-term vision. And I found that, you have to cultivate that. And if you just try to do a long-term vision with a brand new leader, having them look far out, it's almost impossible. It's a muscle you have to exercise. So what we always done is we'll just kind of do little exercises where we say, all right, what's your goal for the end of this day? And then what's your goal for the end of the week? And then once they get that down, what's your goal for the end of the month? And, as time goes on, you can flex that muscle further and further. So Inspire Tomorrow, I think we're all teachers first. If you're a leader, you got to be a teacher first. And so, it's the best way to do that is to teach your team how to look long term and look to the future. Is that something that you do as well, or is that something you have similar experience with?
Yeah, I guess, because for me, leadership is all about trust and how other people trust you and how you can engender trust in the situation, in the organisation, in the things that they're doing. And inspiration is a big thing. It's a big influencer. And one thing that Mavericks, willfully independent people, are able to do is to really influence people and inspire them to move forward. So that's why I was really kind of drawn to Inspire Tomorrow, because it feels like a really great mission to have. So if someone had to learn leadership skills, how would you do that?
That's a very, that's an age-old question right there. My tactic is I always break it down into two things. We can kind of cross definitions of management, leadership, and all that. A lot of those things, they blur over kind of like a Venn diagram in some areas. But I break it all down to task. What's the task or mission? What's the purpose that you or your organization has? And then the people, your team. And so you have to be able to develop people skills in order to lead those people, just like you said, trust. Trust is definitely one of the most important ones. How do you earn that trust, that inspiration? How do you listen to them? How do you show empathy? How do you communicate with them? How do you develop them? All those different skills that go into leading people. And then you also have to cultivate the skills that go into managing the task. Time management skills, setting priorities, learning how to delegate, learning those types of things that go into the actual task or purpose itself. So the way I teach leadership and my approach is, I kind of take little tidbits. So I like to go with topics. So, all right, we're going to go over trust. And so me and my teammate will work on building that trust. So I'll set up a little plan for them to do, read some articles, get some exercises, have them set some goals specifically for that. And then we'll work on it and follow up, and we go from there, and we just keep building and flexing those muscles as we can.
Wow, that's quite an interesting way of doing it. I don't know many people that do it in such a focused topic way. Do you think that's something that you've picked up from the military?
Military, and I grew up a very strict background. My father, he was only in the military for 5 years, but he never let those principles that he learned go away. And he was a very disciplined man, and so I grew up in a very strict home in regards to that. And then I was in martial arts, which is very strict, and then I went right into the military. So my whole life has been very structured, I guess. That's kind of my fear over the next year as I lose that structure and go out into the real world. But yeah, I've always been very driven to self-reflection. I just fell down. How'd I fall? How can I make that better for the next time around? And, it's not about why. It's more about why I failed as opposed to, who pushed me down. How did I let them push me down? How did I fail? And how can I do that better next time? So my strategy has always been more of the long game. So like you said, I think a lot of people don't take that same strategy because it takes a lot of time to be willing to be deliberate and focus on specific qualities one at a time with an individual, as opposed to, hey, just get your stuff together. This is where, and, give them a whole bunch of things to work on. So I'm more of the long game kind of person in that regards, which was really how we kind of came up with Inspire Tomorrow. Okay. What's your approach?
My approach into leadership.
Yeah. So how would you develop me?
So being a Maverick, I think you're a Maverick behaviourist. So you're someone that borrows Maverick traits within their work sphere. I would therefore look at what your end goal is, what is it that you want to achieve, and then I'd show you how to do that. And I think that I would look at the things that touch on leadership. So you already have a really great idea and philosophy on leadership. So I would look at the things that sit around it, like persuasion and influence, dynamics, and then apply that to what your goals are. Because what struck me as interesting is that what you're going to be doing in 2018 is very similar to what you do with your clients. So I thought that was quite interesting to see that you're almost walking the same path as what you're doing with your clients moving forward. Is there anything?
Yeah, absolutely.
Is there anything you would do slightly differently because it's you, or do you think that you would find yourself a coach or somebody to help you along the way?
Oh, you always want to look for some coach. I do exactly kind of like what you said there with, having that end goal in mind. And I don't know why in the leadership realm, we always talk about mountains when we talk about goals, but I always kind of look at those mountain peaks off in the distance to where, where do I want to be as a father, as a husband, in different areas of my life. And I know if I set, those smart goals to work to it, I'm going to fail. We never are 100% on our plans, but as long as we're always taking that next step towards that mountain and up that mountain to get to that peak, we're moving forward. So that's always my big thing is I want to make sure I'm moving forward towards that mountaintop. So I always try to keep that end goal in mind. And, that's the big thing I noticed with a lot of my guys is they do great until they stumble. Once they lose that perfect streak, they miss, one assignment and will have one little setback. They think they failed. I'm like, well, no, you had a failure, but you didn't fail. You're still on the right path. You're still a lot closer to that end goal than you were when you started. What caused that failure and how can we get past it? And that's kind of a same approach I take with myself.
Yeah, and I think that's quite interesting because as a Maverick, a socialized Maverick, I look at it as almost, I don't see mountain peaks, I see a hurdle race. So it's just something to jump over and get to the next one that's not an obstacle. So I try to engender that kind of feeling with the people that I work with, that you're not climbing a mountain, you're jumping over something that happens to be in your way. So it's just a slight sort of perspective change. And I really love the way you talked about leading in terms of your whole life. And my view has always been that we are role models, and we should be role modeling change, because exactly like you said, you're a father, you're a husband, you're a leader, you've got colleagues you work with, and in all these different spheres, you are demonstrating what it's like in those roles, in those different personas, and it should be intentional, which is why your lead with purpose makes so resonates with me, because everything that you do in that sphere is intentional.
Absolutely. You have to be intentional. My philosophy and the philosophy of my team is always plan, do, what's next. So in the terms of Inspire Tomorrow, what our goal is we look at that as we plan, what is that mountaintop that we're walking towards, and we plan not just, because obviously we can't plan out every single step to that point, because our conversation, if we sat down before we even started talking and laid out an outline of all the things we want to talk about, I would guarantee you we wouldn't stick to that particular plan. Just even the shortest of plans, walk into your bedroom from wherever you're at, something's going to change your plan. You're going to see something that derails you. But you always have to have that end goal in sight. And so we make a plan for where are we going. And then what we really care about is the very next step to get us there. And then we do it. We do that step. We take that step towards it. And then once we do that, all right, what's next? What can we learn from what just happened? How can we make it better? And, how can we get to our end goal even more? And so I find doing that is much more enjoyable. You actually get to enjoy the experience, as opposed to spending 20 years, trying to accomplish something. And then you get there and you look back and you're like, well, I didn't enjoy any of it. My family's gone. And I pushed them away because I was so determined to get. So that's always been, I don't want to say always been my process, but that has definitely been the one that I've evolved over the years. And it seems to work out for me. I've seen many of my mentors do something very similar, and I kind of stole the bits and pieces I liked and made it my own.
A good plan to me. And that flexibility is, again, quite unusual, because you said exactly with the people that you work with that they fall over when something different happens. And it's, again, maybe that's one of the Maverick traits that you borrowed there, because it's kind of a recognition that things aren't always going to go well, but that doesn't matter, because you yourself will succeed. You see what I mean? So
I'll try.
Faith in yourself. Yeah, you will. I'm sure you will. It'll be quite interesting to see what path that you take and how you get there.
Well, thank you.
So, what do you think will be different in terms of leadership in outside the military?
That's a very good question. That's something I've been doing a lot of exploration into. I think a lot of it is going to be me breaking down the perceptions that others have about the military. I think a lot of people just think we're mindless followers of orders. And what they don't realize is, we have some very young individuals, 18, 19-year-olds who have more responsibility than a lot of people in the real world do at much higher positions. So we put, you have to learn a very technical job within, you have about 3 months to learn a job that could take somebody years to master. And so we get pushed very hard in that regards, and our leadership skills and management skills are cultivated from day one. And so I don't think a lot of people recognize that. They just think of us as more mindless followers, when in reality, we're more of those people that, we stand up to authority and we push back and we say, hey, this is what we're going. But once we voice our concerns and everything's on the table, whoever's in charge, whoever's role that is, they make the call and we move forward, and we just suck it up and go from there. We're at that point, it's now our decision. So I think a lot of people don't see that, because we do. Once we get to that point of this is what we're going to do, we're all on the same page and we do it. And it almost looks like blind obedience, but behind the scenes, we're a 15-round boxing match having it out to make sure we got the right decision moving forward to take care of our people. So I think the biggest thing is going to be fighting that perception of leadership and the perception of what the military actually is.
Yeah, and you finding your own definition and getting that out
Yes.
there will probably be the biggest thing. Because I suppose most people, what do they know about military leadership is what they see on TV and in the movies. And in the
Exactly.
movies, the leader does this, and everyone goes, I'm not too sure about that, but we'll do it anyway, and then they will die.
Right.
And you think, why did somebody
Yeah,
say you
you're right.
can't do that?
Exactly. And we're all, we all have endless ammo too in the movies. So that's not reality.
It's a bit like, if I say something Maverick, if someone hasn't read my content or seen me speak somewhere, that they immediately go, "Oh, you mean like Top Gun?" It's like, no.
That's right. You did pick a very interesting name if you don't want to make that crossover, huh?
Yeah, and I had to define it and say, no, it means this, willfully independent. And I can see what when you take your style of leadership that's been crafted from the military in the sense of, the things from your father and the things that you've learned and say, right, that's that, and here's my spin, and this is what leadership means, will be quite an interesting journey. One well worth following, I would say.
Now, could you utilize that Top Gun thing just out of curiosity, kind of to run down that path? He started off as an extreme maverick, from the way I understand it, and he kind of turned into more of a socialized maverick, where he gained influence through his actions and his street cred, if you will.
Yeah, and I think one of the biggest, it's a good point, I think one of the biggest things that socialised mavericks understand, with great power comes great responsibility, and I think in the movie he has that moment where he goes, there are actually consequences of my behaviour. Yeah. Although I would say that he was never really very extreme. He just wasn't very socialised. So, he wasn't right at the end of that scale, because it's very difficult for someone to move that pathway. But yeah, I think Top Gun does show an idea of the mischievousness of a maverick, the charm, the take risk aspects. But what it didn't show, so at the beginning on the socialised maverick, was the responsibility and the care and how you influence others. Because he was very kind of self-centered or self-interested when he started off.
That's a very good point. I know in your book, I wish I can remember the young girl's name, because I just read this story the other day, where she had basically a rough day in her office, and her mood ended up impacting the entire office just because she wasn't acting the way she normally is. And so, one of her coworkers saw it, and they thought that for sure somebody was getting fired, and it all went down, and it just spread throughout the whole organization. It turned out she had a bad day, and her mood was, she was so influential that her mood was so infectious that the whole company was on pins and needles. And so that's their influence is amazing. And by the way, anyone who hasn't read your book, they need to go out and buy it right away. That's an amazing book. I've read it twice already, and I think my biggest thing is I've been studying leadership for a lot of years, and I've been trying to find how it parallels with, because most of the time you could read that and you're like, oh, they're talking about, Euclid's taxonomy on leadership, or, this theory or that, and I cannot cross it over. So it's a very refreshing and fresh view on leadership. So it's a very must read, if I will.
Thank you for that, Joe. The book is, for those that's listening, the Maverick Paradox, the secret power behind successful leaders. And yeah, it is unique in the sense that it does look at leadership from, as you said, a very fresh perspective. And the example that you said in the book is an interesting one, in the sense that mavericks are influential even without saying anything. And people do watch and observe to see if they can tell, what's going on. And if you're being very professional and have never shown vulnerability in a work area, then I think what happens is the socialised maverick cracks a little bit and gets a little bit stressed, then other people start to panic and wondering, what's going to happen next. It's an interesting dynamic.
Yeah, it's a very fresh take.
Thank you. I think it's probably a good place to stop there, actually, but I've really enjoyed our conversation. Joe, will you come back another day?
Absolutely. I enjoyed it so much, and I appreciate it, and I appreciate your time, and thank you for everyone for listening in. If you want to learn more about me or what I'm up to, go to inspiretomorrow.org. and you can find out just about everything that's going to be going on.
Cool. It's definitely a journey that the listeners here should be watching. And who doesn't want to inspire tomorrow and lead with purpose? So thank you very much, Joe, and we will speak soon. Goodbye.
Absolutely. Thank you, Judith. Bye.
Thank you once again for tuning into the Maverick Paradox podcast. I hope you have enjoyed listening to my conversation with Joe as much as I have enjoyed having it. If you would like to learn more about Mavericks and leadership, then please subscribe to my podcast on iTunes, Stitcher, or one of the other popular podcast platforms. Find out how willful independence can ultimately change all our futures. Thanks again, and see you soon.